We're going to go ahead and call to order at 7:01. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Tudor?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson Sardella?
Here.
Commissioner Bilt?
Here.
Vice Mayor Ross?
Here.
Mayor Trumpman?
Here. Can we stand for the pledge? And after the pledge, if you could just stand for a few minutes. Thank you. Flags that way.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. Just asking to stand for a moment of silence seems inadequate for the 17 lives lost and others injured on February 14th at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. The expressions of sympathy we might offer are of little comfort to the families of the students and teachers that were murdered. Unfortunately, there are no truly meaningful legislative actions that we as a body can take to change the course of future events, as these powers lie in the state and federal legislative levels and their agencies. We as a community can stand together with the families and the students and demand sensible change. To quote Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, "You have to stand up for some things in this world." Please stand and join the Commission and the whole nation to honor Alyssa Aldaheff, died at 14 years old. Scott Beagle, 35. Martin Duque, 14 years old. Nicholas Dorette, 17. Aaron Feiss, 37. Jamie Gutenberg, 14. Christopher Hickson, 49. Luke Hoyer, 15 years old. Kara Logran, 14 years old. Gina Montalto, 14. Joaquin Oliver, 17. Alana Petty, 14. Meadow Pollock, 18. Helena Ramsey, 17. Alex Shatner, 14. Carmen Schentrup, 16. Peter Wang, 15. And those injured. Thank you. Addition, deletions, and withdrawals to the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any withdrawals or deletions from the agenda?
At the present time, we have, we're going to be withdrawing at this time number 9.B, which is the driveway ordinance 2018-02.
Members of the Commission, anything to withdraw from or add to the agenda?
Yes, I don't understand the idea for the meeting procedures. This is something that actually comes under the purview of our village clerk. So why not, if there's something that needs to be done, it needs to be done through the village clerk.
Are you making a motion?
I make a motion that we withdraw it.
That's item 12C.
12C.
Is there a second for that motion?
It
Nope.
seems very unusual.
Motion has died.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did you?
Well, I was about to just,
I'm sorry.
make a...
Vice Mayor? I'm sorry. Commissioner Johnson Sardello. Sorry.
I mean, I read through it, but I think there's other items within this topic here that is going to require more time. So I'll second the motion because I think it needs to come back at a time because there's things on this agenda that we need to get through. And
Vice Mayor.
Okay, item 12C is the very last item on our agenda outside of announcements and the village manager's report, which used to go at the early part of the agenda, but it's been moved to the end. This is the only time that we get to discuss things as a commission. We talked about it. It was brought up earlier, a couple of meetings ago. I believe the clerk I offered to bring these procedures, and the mayor instructed the clerk to maybe put something together. It didn't happen, so 2 months later, I put it together and I offer it for our discussion. This is not being imposed on anyone. The clerk doesn't rule over the commission. The commission decides what its procedures will be, and in fact, it is written in our charter that the commission is to decide on meeting procedures. And that's why I bring it forth for discussion. It's very unusual to have a withdrawal of an item by someone who is not sponsoring that item. I've never seen that happen before.
Attorney Dunkel, is that a procedural problem?
Under Robert's Rules of Order, the chair of the meeting, or the mayor in this case, can make a determination of whether or not to accept the motion or pull the item. Procedurally, you can make the decision of whether or not to move on to that item or entertain the motion and pull it.
Okay. My only concern with this item is this comes from a document that's 51 pages long, and we were not given ample sufficient time to read it. There are 7 pages there, and that is my concern. So I would ask the Vice Mayor to reconsider at least pulling the item for now until we have time to review it properly. Would you have a problem with deferring the item?
I don't have a problem with deferring the item, but the pertinent sections of the county procedures were attached as the backup. There are in this 50 pages, there are procedures that are very detailed, that have nothing to do with our process here, and I'm not suggesting that we adopt all of them. I only brought forward the particular meeting procedures that I thought were appropriate.
So are you objecting to defer the item?
Yeah, I am objecting to deferring.
Okay. I'm going to ask the item be deferred for now till the next meeting, till we have ample time to review this.
Is that on a vote? Are we taking a vote on that?
I believe the attorney already said I have the right to do that, correct?
Well, if there's a motion and there's a second...
Then we should go ahead and vote?
Correct. You
Okay, I'll entertain the motion. All those in favor of deferring the item?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
No.
Okay. There are any other withdrawals, or deletions from the agenda?
Madam Mayor, you just have to say whether or not the motion carried or...
I'm sorry, the motion carried, 3-2. Are there any other deletions or withdrawals from the agenda?
I have a follow-up question. Is it your intent to defer this for the next meeting, or just indefinitely?
The motion was to,
We can bring it back at the next meeting. It's not, the motion is just deferring it from this meeting.
that was the motion. Okay, there are no presentations, so open for public comments. Please remember the decorum rules, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Madam Clerk asked that anybody sign in who wants to speak over here. The list has been moved from the podium to over here.
The first person that is coming up is Linda Dillon. You deferring it?
There's a new process no one told us about.
Just to be fair to everybody, Manager Manners, I was just heard about this too, this is a new process I'm putting in place to run the meeting, which is to have everybody sign up in advance. Can we at least tell everybody about this so that they know? I was told this evening that we'll be putting a list together. In order to speak, just go up and sign. You can sign at any time, and then they'll call in the order of those folks signed in. Everybody will have a chance to speak.
Next
Clerk.
person is Mr. Bob Anderson.
What I was going to talk to you about was item 12C that I see that has been moved to next month. But I want to congratulate Roxy on putting together a number of items that are on here, so it's in one place. A lot of the resolutions that have been passed over the years on how to run, for meetings, etc. Instead of it being scattered, it's in one location. But there is some items on there, and I'm glad you're going to be taking a look at this a little bit more. For all the years I was on the commission, a lot of times we would pass certain resolutions hastily and find out there's a lot of unexpected consequences on what we pass. So my suggestion is really take a look at it. And parts of this, there's a few items in here that I was looking at, just happened to jump out at me. If you pass certain parts of this as it's worded, you can have a road commissioner be up there and monopolize, and there's no time limit. And you can't interrupt that person. And we've had things like that before. This would stop you, the mayor, from saying, where that road commissioner is just repeating himself over and over again, saying just wrap it up and let's move on. So you got to be careful on what you're looking at and think about the other consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, who's next?
Ms. Janie Janie Anderson. Alexandria Cruz. Oh.
No worries, thank you.
Barbara Kuhl.
Barbara Kuhl, 111th Street. There's nobody here. It seems like nobody ever comes anymore. I looked at tonight's agenda under new business. Honestly, I thought this was a joke. Close point of dispensing medication during public health emergency. And the backup reads, in today's world of terrorism, biological terrorism, active shooters, and the overall unknown. Honestly, it sounds like a movie trailer. This is Biscayne Park. The other thing on this was a resolution to our that was a resolution to the legislature. I mean, like a toothless, I know you want to say something, but it's kind of like an absolute waste of paper to even come up with such a toothless statement. Pelican Harbor sponsorship. I wrote all of you emails about how I feel that the village should not be using tax dollar to spend it on dinners for commissioners, so I won't go into that. Under old business, you have floodplain management, which is a requirement, just like a routine thing the village needs to do. And then the driveway ordinance, which 5 years ago, I spent the first 3 years working on that, caring about it. The last two, I told Gary, I don't even want to read, I'm not even going to read whatever you came up with, because I'm over it. I don't really care what you do. We have medians in our village with cars parked all over them, cars driving across the medians. You need education and enforcement. And I'd like you to answer this question, and I'll give you a month to find the information. How many tickets have the police given out for anybody driving across the median? I see it all the time. They have to see some. Cars on the front lawns, the same houses with the same cars, day after day after day. And nothing seems to be done. You need education and enforcement. Swales that are absolutely nothing more than dirt and rock. And it has nothing to do with the driveway ordinance. Don't even bother with that argument. Right now on the books, homeowners are required to maintain their swales. Again, education and enforcement. Crumbling roads. When are you going to start talking about our roads? I see my time is running out, so I'm going to speed this up. You know what? It might be the job of the manager to carry out these things, but it's your job as a commissioner to ask, why aren't these things being done? For the past year, you have brought nothing to this commission that has to do with any of these issues that the people who aren't sitting here, they're not here because they are sick and tired of talking about these things and getting no reaction.
Time.
Thank you so much.
I am next, right?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's going to sound like we're giving you a double whammy. Honestly, I did not know what Barbara was going to say, nor did she know what I was going to say. A code of ordinance is designed to set the standards. The impression of the village is not one that's based on a few nice houses, but the many houses in the village that don't meet those standards. Despite the efforts of code enforcement, the village looks worse than it ever has. I've been here for many years. Code enforcement used to be almost incidental. There's been a loss of pride in this village, and as we go down, it spirals further. There have been positive steps in code enforcement, and I'm certainly glad we've added a second code officer, albeit part-time. Actually, we have 5 people who have been certified in code enforcement, 3 of whom we've paid for. 3 of those people, I realize, have other positions. But that's a lot of eyes. And that's a lot of opportunity to really catch these things that we see over and over and over. There is a house that routinely has 4 or 5 cars parked on the front lawn on an avenue. I don't know how you could possibly miss it. Months. Having successful compliance takes leadership, education, and enforcement. I don't see leadership coming from the commission. Only in one meeting that I can recall was the fact that residents are unhappy with code enforcement was it acknowledged by Commissioner Ross. This was followed by a brief discussion of doing a sweep, and that was it. The sweep is nothing more than a knee-jerk, stopgap, placebo. The point being that we need consistent, comprehensive code enforcement. When one violation goes unnoticed, it leads to another. In other words, the broken window complex. The commission needs to decide. Do you want to abolish codes? Do you want to weaken codes? Or do you really want to enforce the codes that we have? Because we never hear from you. We don't hear you ask anything. We don't hear you do anything. You apparently just accept what's out there because there's no discussion. Having codes that aren't enforced weakens the whole structure. Creating new ones on top of that, such as this ordinance that you were proposing, it's not going to be enforced. I mean, as Barbara indicated, you have property maintenance requirements now that don't allow for dirt yards and dirt swales and dirt driveways. It's been there forever. I have never once seen a violation with a lack of landscaping, sod, or ground cover on a swale and a yard. And quite frankly, since you're not allowed to have dirt, if you have a dirt driveway, that's not allowed. It's got to be paved or sodded or covered with ground cover. So let's jump back to education for a second. I appreciate the attempt to knock on doors and inform people to get voluntary compliance. I'm going to run out of time.
Time.
You could just finish up, Mr. Cole.
Give me 2 seconds. That only works if people home. If a person's away or people work, they don't get the benefit of that. So they get a citation, somebody else might get a courtesy call. It seems to me to be a lot more effective to put out a letter with the common violations as well as the citations.
Time, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yes, you may. Go ahead.
Linda Dillon, I wasn't going to speak because you pulled the item that I was going to talk about, but since you might consider it at the next meeting, I'll go ahead and mention my comments anyway. There were 2 things. One, the procedures that I guess Dade County is using is that if an item after 6 months that it cannot be reconsidered. I think we're a small village and sometimes things are not always considered right away, and I would like to not see that as be part of the procedures so that you could bring back anything at any time that you wanted to. And the other thing is that under current Robert's rules, as I understand them, while the chair is encouraged to let other people make motions, the chair should be allowed to make motions and they do not have to relinquish that position. So I think that's something that should be considered as well. The other thing is, from my volunteer work in Village Hall, I see the number of citations that are given, the number of violations that are noted, and I also see the number of people that don't pay when they have been sent more than one notice, and I'm thinking that maybe the village should explore having a collection agency.
Thank you.
Janie Anderson, 11th Place, 119th Street. Ditto what Linda said about the collection agency. Delray Beach uses it and apparently is being very successful. I, Tracy, want to thank you very much for putting forward the resolution, safety in public venues. I think showing support of those Parkland kids and encouraging state and federal leaders to get off their butts and get something moving. I mean, it's time, the excuses got to stop. We got to stop saying, oh, nothing we can do. We don't say that about anything else. We tighten laws when it's necessary. Look at the changes we had to make after 9/11, but we did it. And we're inconvenienced by it, and we accept those restrictions, and we accept restrictions on the First Amendment. So we've got to get past like I said, all the excuses, move forward. I hope you guys will approve this tonight, and that you also send it on to the principal at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and on to the Parkland Commission so that they know that they have support from other areas. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. Madam Clerk, any other public comments?
I don't have anyone else that has registered for...
Is anybody else who is not registered would like to, since this is a new process, who would like to speak? Okay. Public comments is now closed. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody like to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Just for a point of clarification, our agenda in the past, right behind public comment, had a section for response to public comment, but that does not seem to be, this is the first agenda that does not have that item in it. Are we not going to respond to the questions raised?
That can be brought up if you wouldn't mind bringing that up at the process of the meetings, because that is really part of what that's going into. We hadn't done it before. It was then put in, then it was taken out. It's been back and forth,
Well,
depending on the length of the agenda.
It does seem like the procedures are already put in place.
No,
I
this
don't
was
know
put in,
about-
this was put in after, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, Vice
I
Mayor.
don't know who put these in place, for example, adding and removing that, which now has become an expectation, and also requiring the sign-in. That's something that's very new to us, and it wasn't even announced before we started our meeting. So someone is already putting procedures in place. We just don't want to address them all at one time. Is that the way we're going to work it?
I would like to address those types of things in an agenda item, since we don't have one on that now. Feel free to bring it back. I know I would like to, we had talked about the clerk presenting her recommendations, so I'm going to let the clerk, because this is something I was also not aware of before the meeting, so.
And Mayor, if you could please give me a moment of privilege, I can go ahead and make some clarification on what has happened.
Please.
The area of going ahead and responding back to the public, I went all the way back to find out at what time was that put in. It was put in at a time in which Mayor Corviero had asked for it to be put in because of the budget. It went on that one time, and then it came off again, and it came back on, and I can get you all the dates. I had done the research previously, and in my experience, it's always been that when residents come up for public comment, the staff is to handle any of those questions, not the commission going ahead and going back and forth with the public. That being said, in regards to any type of different changes that has been done, including the PowerPoint presentation, some of it I've gone ahead and taken it upon myself. Nobody asked me to change the PowerPoint presentation, but I thought it was more updated and looked a lot nicer than what we had before. So I went and did that. In the past as well, I was also told that there was a sign-in sheet where people were called. In other municipalities, that is the way it's run, so that people sign in, you know the amount of people that are going to sign in. If it's 5, 10, 15, whatever it is, but that way you know exactly how many individuals are signing in. I'm at a point where there seems to be a discrepancy, and whatever the commission wishes to do, that is what I will do. But my only reasoning for this is to help the commission to be with a more consistent type of agenda. And if you don't wish to make changes, then so be it. But then, then I really can't do much at this
I want to ask one question, clarification. I know we had asked you 2 meetings ago to come up with better procedures, and I'm assuming this is part of those procedures that you recommended.
It's not, no, it's not, it is and it's not. You're right. I was asked to do that. But this is a very different municipality that handles things very differently. And in order to go ahead and change all the recommendations that would need to take place, it would really require for all of you to agree upon it. And if that's the case, then a lot of the way you handle your meetings would completely change. And every single time that I bring something forth, it's being told, well, this is the way it was done in the past. Well, the reason why additions, deletions, and withdrawals are placed in number 4 is for everything. Every single thing, because right after that, the next thing you do is go ahead and approve your
Which I didn't
agenda.
do, which I should have done, and I didn't do that.
Okay, so you need to approve your agenda at that time so that that is all the changes that are going to take place. Otherwise, then there's no need to approve the agenda if you're going to change it again somewhere else. So I am more than happy to go ahead and try to put something together, but mostly the biggest issue that I have is I have no staff. I do not have the staff like Dade County has, trillions of clerks, and they have multiple amounts of people, and they have an enormous time. As it is, I spent a lot of time here,
Yes, you
and
did.
I don't mind at all, but in all due honesty, I cannot go ahead and continue what I'm doing now because I won't have, I will stay here permanently. And in addition to this, I have HR, I have a lot of other tasks that have been placed upon me.
May I ask
I do
one?
apologize, but
No.
that is the situation.
May I ask just one question? If it's possible, since we did task you with that 2 commissions ago, if you could, for the next meeting, put together what your recommendations are for us and bring them back, because that is what we did ask at that point. If you could do that, at least put it in and send it out to us.
That's fine.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
There's a section of our village charter, section 4.01, talks about commission meetings. And sub B under there says rules and journals. The commission shall determine its own rules of procedure and order of business and shall keep minutes open for public inspection. It's not for the clerk to determine how the commission will run its procedures. It's for this commission to determine it. And recognizing that the clerk wears many hats. I had initially volunteered to prepare it. I'm not trying to change procedures in the middle of a meeting. I'm not trying to, before we get to a meeting, declare new procedures. What I brought was an item for us to discuss. I didn't even bring it as a resolution. It was brought as a new business item to discuss those rules and procedures that our charters say the commission shall determine for itself.
Okay. Since this is clearly something that's going to take more time for us to have, and it's being brought forth next meeting, or perhaps since we've already passed that. So let's move on for now, bring it back next meeting, whatever changes everybody wants to see, bring it as a group of 5 of us doing this together. If we need a workshop for this, we can do it then, if the agenda's too full. So for a consensus, would you prefer this done in a workshop, or would you prefer this done in a meeting, next meeting?
I think, I'm sorry, Commissioner Sadal?
I'm fine with some of those rules, and I think that I probably even mentioned to our former commissioner, Mr. Anderson, when I was first elected, that I would like to see procedures. So I don't have an issue with what Vice Mayor Ross brought forward. I just, because of the documents, and I think that comments also that our former commissioner made, that we have to take a look at things closely. I just wanted the time to do that. I don't know if it requires a workshop or if it could just get done and banged out at the next meeting. So I'm fine for it to be at the next meeting.
Okay.
I think personally, I'd rather have it done at a workshop. When we come to do things at the commission meetings, I think part of the reason people don't come to the commission meetings is they've lasted for hours and hours and hours. We can do it some Saturday morning, any morning anybody wants to do it, and I think that if somebody wants to attend, they can attend. If they don't want to attend, they won't attend. And as it is, I believe a workshop is, for ourselves, there's no public comment. Is that correct?
Under Florida law, the only thing that's required for public comment is the public has an opportunity to speak on a proposition before it's voted on within the decision-making process. Now, if it's going to be decided on or if it's going to be worked on and discussed at a workshop, so long as it's voted on at a public meeting, like the next commission meeting, and there's public comment afforded to it, then in that case, you are correct, yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Duda, you have a preference?
I'm fine with discussing this item at the next commission meeting.
Okay. Vice Mayor, do you have a preference?
I just wanted to clarify, our village attorney is not very familiar with the resolutions of the village, having been with us for a short time. And aside from Florida law, we do have resolutions that provide for public speaking on good and welfare, as well as providing public comment at a first reading of an ordinance, which is above what's required by the state. So the village really has a tradition of inviting public comment, and that's something that our residents our constituents have gotten used to. Just a point of information.
My only comment is my concern was not having procedures. I don't have a problem with having procedures. I have a problem with amending or taking parts and then trying to put it together on the dais while we're all sitting here. I don't want to do that with the attorney time. I think it's something if we're going to do as a commission, as a group, we should do so in workshop. I think that's a more appropriate forum for something of this magnitude. And I've come to believe from the driveway ordinance that we probably should have done it that way with the driveway ordinance, so we were not sitting here doing it at the dais. I don't think we should be legislating from the dais. So, as a consensus then, you want to pick a date for a workshop?
We already agreed to bring this forward at the next meeting.
There was a motion made to do that, and we already passed that motion, correct? Okay, so that's done. Let's bring it back to the next meeting. If it goes on, if it goes on too long, we can then deal with it then. All right, let's go on to the consent agenda, please. Is there anybody wants to pull anything from consent agenda?
Clarification, the clerk sent some amended minutes this afternoon, and I want to make sure that consent agenda now includes those amended minutes.
Yes, please.
Then I'm happy to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the next item is Resolution 2018-06. Attorney?
I'm sorry, did you say resolution?
That's part of the consent agenda.
Oh, it was put in the consent.
Right.
I'm sorry, I was put in the consent, never mind. Scratch, sorry. Number 9, ordinance.
This is
Yeah.
ordinance number 2018-01, an ordinance by the Village of Biscayne Park amending the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 6.5, floodplain management regulations, to make modifications to bring the regulations into agreement with the most current FEMA-approved code companion floodplain management ordinance for Florida communities, providing for severability and providing for an effective date. This is a request to approve and adopt at second reading.
At this point, I believe we opened it for public comments, is that correct?
My understanding, you can, but my understanding is you only hold public hearings during first reading of ordinances.
We've always done it both in this village, so I will go with
Yeah,
what our
perhaps
norm
you
has
can.
been. So I'm going to open up for any public comments for the floodplains management, and you do not need to sign in for that. We'll come up with procedures later that are more appropriate so everybody knows what they are. Okay, and there's no comments? It's closed. Is there a discussion?
I make a motion to approve ordinance 2018-1 on a second reading.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It has to be a roll call vote because it's...
Roll call because it's an ordinance.
Sorry, I do apologize.
Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Tudor,
Yes.
Commissioner Bilt,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson Sardella,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ross,
Yes.
Mayor Trumpman.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 12AA, which is discussion on village attorney. That is my item. For those of you who aren't aware, unfortunately, Attorney John Hearn, who's been with us for over 20 years, had an opportunity that he chose to take and has such tendered his resignation. He will be remaining with us and working behind the scenes with us until such time we can transition to a new attorney. I want to thank John Hearn, and we'll do that at a different time, and for all the work that he has done for this village over the many years. We were just notified this a few days prior, so I am recommending the commission work with Attorney Hearn in appointing an interim attorney who will be attending the meetings during the transition, which I believe we have sitting over here. And then begin the process of finding new legal representation in the next few months. I brought this forth because I thought that we should all discuss how we would like to proceed, since we have not done this in many, many, many years. I'll open the floor for discussion. And actually, before I do that, can I ask the attorney to go ahead and talk about process for us, please?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry about this, trying to open up the agenda on my iPad. It started playing the video from the last meeting. So, do not want to relive that. So the process for selecting a new attorney, this is a professional service. Professional services generally are exempt from procurement codes, and I believe the same is true here. So with that said, you can do anything you want to recruit, meaning you can do letters of interest, you can do an RFP if you decide to go that process. You can even just put an advertisement in the Sun Sentinel, the Florida Bar Journal, or the Daily Business Review saying the City of Biscayne Park or Village of Biscayne Park is seeking a new village attorney. I did speak with Mr. Hearn. The one requirement which we recommend is that at a minimum for requirements that the person have 5 years of local government law experience. Other than that, any other requirement could be required is that the village might want. You might want more years of experience. You might want other things, but the one thing that we do recommend is at least 5 years of local government law.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to open up the discussion. I'm going to start actually on my right. Commissioner.
First of all, I just want to say that it's been a pleasure working with Attorney Hearn during my time here on the commission. I was a little disappointed to hear that he was going to be leaving us, but, I understand opportunities come up. I'm really open to whatever process the rest of the commission desires to go about finding a new attorney for the village.
Commissioner Bilt.
I did speak to our existing attorney now, and as he had said, we can do it just with an advertisement. My thought is, let's have Christian put together an advertisement, circulate it to all of us, and as long as we all approve, instead of waiting for the next meeting, we could get an advertisement out there in a week or two. Would that be...
The only concern I would have is sunshine requirements. If you want to delegate the authority to the village manager and have rough requirements, or perhaps recommend the village manager work with Mr. Hearn to come up with a list of requirements, that's something that can be done. But my only concern is there might be some sort of sunshine issue if he sends it out, because then there'd be in a way, a vote without having a meeting. That's my only concern with that.
Okay.
Anything else?
No.
Vice Mayor?
As much as I appreciate having Andrew with us for our meetings, I'm sure he's got other duties that he has to get tend to as well, so I think we should not delay the process of putting out letters of interest or an advertisement, either of those. Thank you for sitting in on our meetings and tending to, I know there's other matters that you tend to as well besides being here, and I really do appreciate that, filling the gap for us. John, of course, he's not here, so I can only say great things about him, really, for all the time that he's been with our village. He's always been very even keel and made sure that he was actually more cautious than I would have recommended, but he always made sure that we protected the village from any liability, and I appreciate that. So I think that what we should do is put out either letters of interest or an advertisement. I don't know where we want to advertise it. I think more in the, like the Florida League of Cities, Miami-Dade League of Cities, those places where municipal attorneys sort of hang out would be a very cost-effective way of getting word out there, and of course not a formalized RFP or RFQ process. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson-Sardella?
I agree as well that I'd like to start the process sooner than later. And I don't think we need a formal RFP. It could be a letter of interest or an ad. Besides the Miami-Dade League of Cities, I think it should be with the Florida Bar. I mean, although we would say that the Miami-Dade League of Cities is where people who have municipal contact, but you're still losing people that may not be involved in that. And there's plenty of attorneys that deal with municipalities, especially I have my LLM from UM in real property development, and many of those attorneys went on to work with cities and things like that. So I think the Florida Bar is still someplace that we should place an ad in the Florida Bar Journal. That's what I would recommend.
Thank you. The reason I said an interim attorney is because Attorney Hers has expressed his regret that he is incredibly busy with the Parkland shooting and other responsibilities. And so I just want to make sure we have a transition period between what that length of that transition period is. I also don't want to rush in to hire somebody just to fill a slot if we have representation, which I feel very comfortable with, and I thank you for that. I think this is not an uncommon thing to make sure that we have consistency of staff, and we have that. Of course, ideally, you'd want to move on that as quickly as possible, but I also don't want to expedite a process and have to pick because we're worried about being without, because I think we do have representation, and Attorney Henderson has assured me that he will make sure that whatever things that are open and pending, we'll work through to close. We do have things like, I know we have our PBA contracts coming up, and we have a bunch of other matters, driver ordinance and other things that he's still working on, and so I just want to make sure there's a smooth transition. My issue will be is, I also agree that no RFP is needed. I think a letter of interest or an advertisement would be fine. I also like the idea of it being circulated in the Florida Bar and other attorney central locations in addition to my Florida League of Cities and Miami-Dade League of Cities. But I do think we also need to discuss about what kind of services. We haven't really looked at a job advertisement for an attorney in 20 years, and I would like input from Attorney Hearn. I mean, he's been with us for 20 years, so he's pretty well-versed on what our needs are. So I would like to have the opportunity to speak with him and have his recommendations while we're filling out an advertisement for that. That's my recommendations. Any other comments?
Yes. So if we look at our village charter, there's a description of the village attorney and the village attorney's duty. I can read them out, but I think that we certainly need to go by this, first of all, because that's
right.
Our law. So it says, the commission shall appoint an attorney who is licensed to practice in the state of Florida to serve as village attorney, and who shall serve at the pleasure of the commission. The attorney shall act as the legal advisor to an attorney and counselor for the village and all of its officers in matters related to their official duties under such terms, conditions, and compensation as are consistent with this charter and as may be established. The commission at any time may remove the attorney as provided, and there's a section to provides for that. When requested by the commission or manager, the attorney shall, 1, prepare all contracts, bonds, and other instruments in writing, or shall endorse on each his or her approval of the form, language, and execution thereof. 2, shall prosecute and defend for and on behalf of the village all complaints, suits, and controversies in which the village is a party. 3, shall furnish his or her opinion on any question of law related to their respective powers and duties. And 4, shall perform such other professional duties as may be required by ordinance, by resolution of the commission, by this charter, or such as are prescribed for village attorneys under the general laws of the state of Florida, not inconsistent with this charter. And no contract with the village shall be binding upon the village until the attorney has approved such contract for form, language, and execution. So when we were looking for a village manager that has a broad range of duties, although there are some described here, but we were able to decide what disciplines we were going to look for in a candidate to be manager, and I think this search is going to be much more narrow and very, very clearly described in our charter what we expect the attorney to do. Of course, time over time, there are certain specialties like employment law where we've had to contract or engage an attorney for a specific matter, so we don't necessarily need to have an expert at those other things. I think that what's described here in the charter can fit very well into a letter of interest inquiry or an advertisement along with the requirements suggested by Attorney Hearn. But as a matter of formality, I think perhaps we should I'll start with a motion to accept Attorney Hearn's resignation so that we have a record of that.
Just as a clarity point, I know we put a letter of resignation in, but it has an open timeline in terms of filling in. So would the motion contain that in?
You mean you could add that as a friendly amendment to the motion where it'll be open up until appointment of another attorney, but you could just formally accept the resignation? I think that's what Commissioner Ross is seeking, just to accept that.
And as it was offered, his communication to us, his written communication to us, said he was resigning, but offered him his services on a transition. So that's what I'm looking to accept.
That's your motion?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second on the motion?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That's recorded. So then, shall we make a motion to go ahead and advertise using the parameters described in our charter and the recommendation made by Attorney Hearn on experience?
Okay, let's go one at a time. Oh, I did this side, let's go on this side.
Looking at the duties again, because there was one item that I didn't think was in here, but I do see it. So I think I'm fine with having a letter of interest that's put out with the 1 through 4, and I guess 5, if you also count C, of Section 3.02 of the Charter, along with Attorney Hearn's recommendation on the experience that we should be seeking.
Okay. Any more comments?
I guess I've got one question. A letter of interest is same as it's an ad? Or what is it?
Well, what you're going to do, you're still going to, no matter what, have to put something out, telling people to submit something. It's similar to an RFP process, except for it's a little less formal. Submit a letter of interest to the village, basically stating your qualifications and that you're interested in the particular position. That's what a letter of interest process is. Your specific process will be determined by your purchasing procedures, which I defer to the village manager on that. However, you could literally just put an ad in the paper that says submit your resumes to this address for consideration at the next, village commission meeting.
Okay, and I guess I possibly would like to see it maybe, instead of exactly what it says in our charter, possibly say we need somebody who's municipal law, labor law, contract law, litigation, and maybe HR. Make it simple, easy, so they understand exactly what we're looking for. And I guess it doesn't actually mean we're looking for a single individual. We could also be looking for a firm? Is that correct?
That's, what you could do, that's, I guess, another decision for the Village Commission, if you would prefer a firm or if you want a person. So do you want to appoint a firm as village attorney? Do you want to appoint a particular person as village attorney? Or it doesn't matter, let people submit and you'll make the decision at the time.
To me, that would make the most sense. If somebody comes in and says, well, we've got 6 different people, this guy knows municipal, but somebody else knows contract, because I think we've had some issues with the contracts maybe not being as tight as they should be.
And you're right.
Just a moment, I'm sorry.
Could
Is that a question that you?
That's a cool question.
So through the chair, yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
You're right, and that's definitely my concern as well, but with the language that's in the 1 through 4, we're going to get resumes from people that have contract experience, and it's for us as a commission in sorting through those resumes or interviewing to know whether or not, because you could have someone that specializes in contract law, it's not necessarily municipal. I think it's too, we want to get as many in as possible, and if we're too narrow with practice areas, one, you're not going to get one attorney that has all of these practice areas. I'm a litigator, but I also draft contracts. So you're going to get overlap. I think it's just getting a broad enough statement out there to solicit people that we can select from. You know, I have a friend that's a city attorney, and she deals mainly in foreclosures and things like that in the city of Riverside out in California. So I think that we just want to keep it broad enough, like litigation is in here as section 2, prosecute and defend, is a litigator. So I think we're going to solicit what we need to sort through just with the topics that are here.
Any other?
No, I guess my thought is I always like to see things as clearly as possible. These are the disciplines we're looking for. Let them not have to look at something and say, oh, well, yeah, I've done 2 contracts. But that's the way I would look at it.
So you
I'm
want
not an attorney.
specificity and experience of within those sections is what you're...
I would like to see somebody, a person or a firm that has a certain amount of experience in all of those.
I agree with Commissioner Ross on the fact that I think the position is, the advertisement that goes out should focus primarily on the job description or position description that's contained in the charter. And also, it's very important that we utilize the expertise of Attorney Hearn to help us find those intangibles so that we'll, beyond what the charter says, be able to find that ideal candidate that will best serve the village.
I think all of you made good points. I don't have objection to the language, but I would like us, since we are responsible as the commission to do the hiring, I would like to see the job advertisement go to us, have us review it and discuss it, finalize it, and then put it out. That is what I'm recommending, and if we need to do that because of the time frame to have a special meeting to do that, I don't have a problem having a brief meeting doing that. But I do think we need to have Attorney Hearn's input. I think having you draft something, I would have no objection to based upon what both Vice Mayor Ross and Commissioner Johnson Sodelo says. And pretty much everybody up here had all the items involved.
Right. Ultimately, I mean, a municipal attorney is going to have contract experience. They're going to have litigation experience. That's sort of an umbrella that covers all of the individual specifics that we're looking for in an attorney. And I'll be happy to work with Attorney Hearn, put together an advertisement of some sort, and I'll get recommendations from him as well as to where we should advertise. Certainly the League of Cities, Miami-Dade and Florida League of Cities. Both of those, I see ads all the time for city attorneys in those, as well as the Florida Bar. So those are all givens. So
Okay.
I'll be happy to put that together.
Thank you. So is there a motion on the floor to ask the village manager to work with Attorney Hearn to draft, based upon our charter and also the intangibles that have been spoken about up here, to draft a job advertisement or letter of interest, depending on that process, and move forward and bring that back to us at your earliest convenience, and if we need to hold a special meeting, we can do so then. Is there a motion to do so?
We are going to be required to hold a discussion if we're going to have the commission have input, and that means we have to have a special meeting. So I will make that motion and ask that we have a special meeting a week from today to review the advertisement and to put it out so that there's no undue delay. Everyone's clear on March 13th at 6:30.
I'm fine on that date.
I'm fine.
I'm fine.
That works for me.
Okay. Manager?
I'm fine.
Village calendar, do you have that on your calendar?
Let me pull it up.
Madam Clerk, is that going to work for you?
Tuesday, usually there's nothing further than Tuesdays.
Okay. Attorney Dunkio?
I'm available as well.
Thank you. Okay, is there a second for that motion then?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Should we set what the process is going to be, what we contemplate for a process, selection process?
I think we should do that during the meeting on the 13th. That's what I'm trying to say. I personally do not want to, I want to do this carefully and cautiously. We've had an attorney for 20 years, which has been an outstanding institutional knowledge for this village. I would like to make sure whoever we move forward on, we're not rushing through that process. We have coverage. There is no immediacy to do that this evening. I personally like to do that on the 13th. Do we have consensus on that?
Yes, I'm fine.
If you could have your comments whispered to the village manager, please. I cannot open comments for this. Thank you.
So does that conclude the discussion of village manager now?
In just a moment, Vice Mayor, please.
I guess since we've accepted John's resignation, do we now have to formalize Andrew, or what do we do, or?
What,
Well, my understanding was the motion was to accept the resignation as it was in the letter, where John's resigning. However, he's going to continue to offer legal support. Since I work with John, I'm your legal support.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's, you don't have to do anything
Okay,
for me.
Yeah.
just want to make sure.
yeah, so we're fine on that. Okay, thank you. We're finished now with item 12A, unless there's any further discussion. Okay, 12A, Commissioner Tudor?
Yes. As most everybody knows, public safety is very close to my heart. So I want to present this. This is in connection with the, it's a closed, what they call pod system, point of dispensing for medication. What we have here, we have some representatives, Ms. Cruz from the Florida Department of Health. I wanted to have her come up to the podium and give the commission and those in the audience a quick little presentation, high level on the closed pod system. And then if any commissioners have any questions, she'll be the best source for that.
Hi, good evening. I'm Alexandria Cruz from the Florida Department of Health, the city's Readiness Initiative Coordinator, and I have with me Joelle Long, who is also the Assistant Coordinator for the program as well. So first, just thank you for having us. We'll go ahead and just give you a brief overview of what the city's Readiness Initiative is, how it plays in, and how it would play into the Village of Biscayne Park as well. So just a brief overview, the City's Readiness Initiative is a federally funded program through the city, for the Center for Disease Control, for the CDC. It was actually developed after the anthrax attacks back, a few years back in like 2004. And really what it was developed for is to take all of the nation's largest counties and cities and go ahead and make sure that all of their preparedness plans were in line with local plans, state plans, and federal plans. So that if anything was to ever happen and there was to be a catastrophic public health emergency, such as a biological terrorist attack, all of the plans would fall in line with each other. And that's where we get into what's called the Strategic National Stockpile that is aligned with the City's Readiness Initiative. And the reason it's so important to have those plans aligned, local, state, and federal, is because if there was to be a catastrophic public health emergency, like a biological terrorist attack with like anthrax release, then we would need to call in the Strategic National Stockpile, which is a federal asset. For those of you who are not familiar with the Strategic National Stockpile, it is just that. It is a federal cache of medical or of chemical antidotes, antitoxins, medical countermeasures of vaccines, medications, as well as life support equipment that we can request from the federal government to have sent down to our local government and local county here if we were to run out of supplies. When we're talking something like a catastrophic public health emergency, biological terrorist attack, we will run out of supplies. So the Strategic National Stockpile will definitely be called upon in that situation. We can have those federal assets here within 12 to 24 hours of requesting them, and that's where the state, even though we are in Department of Health in Miami-Dade County, we are state employees. That's how the health department works here. We will go ahead and receive those federal assets, break them down, and then we can push them out to the community. Just for time's sake to move on, the way our plan works is if there was something to happen, we have a couple different ways that we can identify if there's anything in the air that the public has been exposed to. Once we make that identification, we will work with our state and our federal partners to go ahead and request these assets. We will go ahead as well as work with the different agencies that we have, the different partners we have, to open up what we call open pods or open points of dispensing. We have 14 of these locations that are throughout the county, throughout Miami-Dade County, and that is where we will dispense either medications or vaccinations to the community members. All of this is free of charge. There's no charge to the community. This is everything that the state will absorb. Where you guys come in, or where other closed pod partners come in, we have universities, hospitals, municipalities, all different types of businesses and organizations, both public and private, is to become what we call a closed point of dispensing, where you only take care of your residents or your constituents or staff, employees, etc., family members. The way that works is when we receive the federal assets, the medical countermeasures, we will go ahead, break them down in our warehouse, or what we call an LDS or local distribution site. We will then go ahead and notify all of our partners of where to pick up, all of our closed point of dispensing partners, where to pick up these medications. Then our closed pod partners, based off of their plan that they already have in place, will go ahead and implement their plan to have their drivers or whoever their staff is that's already identifying their plan to pick up the medications from us, the health department, bring them back to their closed point of dispensing, and start dispensing to their residents or their staff or whoever they might be, whoever's identified in their plan or their population. The reason this is so important is because I like to tell people, think of an open point of dispensing. We have 14 of these. Our goal for City's Readiness Initiative, and this is nationwide, is to dispense to our entire county, which is 3 million people here for us in Miami-Dade, within 48 hours. So from the 40, we have a time frame that's going to start as soon as we notice what's in the air or what people have been exposed to. The reason closed pods is so imperative to helping us reach our goal is because open pods, you're going to be standing in line for hours. There's just absolutely nothing we can do about it. If you think of 3 million people trying to get through your door, it's going to be a lot. It's going to take a lot. So think of Disney, but not as happy. There's no happy ride at the end of it, unfortunately, but your pills or your vaccination. Closed pods, you guys are lucky in that sense where there is no long lines. Your medications are already at your location. Your residents, your staff, your employees, whoever is in your population comes to your centralized location or decentralized, however you decide to plan, which is something that can be talked about later. And then nobody has to leave the comfort of their own home or their own employment agency. They can receive the medications on site. It's good for continuity of operations. It's also good for, in this case, for residents. They don't have to leave their home or their area to go then wait in line at an open pod. I'm not sure, I don't remember off the top of my head your exact population here in the village.
3,000, roughly.
3,000?
Roughly.
Okay, so 3,000, that could be done within a couple hours versus standing in line for 4 to 5 hours at an open point of dispensing location. So just to get into responsibilities quickly, on the side of us as the Department of Health, as a state agency, we'll go ahead and we will provide all the pre-event planning, technical assistance, the training, anything that you guys will need to help you guys get up and going, help you guys make your plan, your dispensing plan. And we'll also provide the medications during the emergency and all the technical assistance that will go along with that. On your side, in the Village of Biscayne Park, you guys would need to sign the memorandum of agreement. This is not legally binding in the sense of if there ever comes a time where we need to activate our plans and you guys say, you know what, we've had a staffing change, we just cannot go through with this, it's not a problem. At that moment, we will just go ahead and notify you of the closest open pod to your location so that your constituents can then go to the closest open pod run by the Department of Health. So it's not a big deal at the end of the day, if for some reason you couldn't carry on with the agreement. After that, we would develop your closed pod plan, right, which would tell everybody how this is going to be done, who your planning team is, what are the logistics of everything. You guys would go ahead and participate in trainings and exercises that we could help you formulate, bring tabletops and workshops so that your community residents know exactly what they would do in the time of an emergency and what it would look like. It also helps you exercise this plan as well. You guys would also just maintain any supplies. Really, that's like office supplies, things, some of the paperwork that people would need to fill out. We're not looking for stacks of things, but at least a couple copies that could be photocopied. We do have an electronic registration system that has already been developed on the side of Miami-Dade County. Basically what it is we've taken all of our paper forms, put them online. It's in a dark site. All your residents can go ahead, they can fill it out online. It goes ahead and does all the triaging on the back end of whether you can safely and effectively take ciprofloxacin, doxycycline, amoxicillin, some of the main medications that we would be dispensing for this type of an emergency. We can do the same thing for vaccinations. You guys are also required to have a medical professional. We don't need their name, but as long as you have a resident or somebody that would be willing to help with that side in case there was any medical questions, that's all we need to know, that you guys have somebody that could help answer questions. Doctors, nurses. During the time of an emergency, when the governor will make the declaration of a public health emergency, it becomes a very wide scope of who can answer those questions, firefighters, EMTs, paramedics. So that's something we can work around as well. And then at the end, you would just dispense the medications following the guidelines that we set forth. So for sake of time, I can answer any questions from this. I can clarify anything. We'll go into more detail.
Okay, let's just go from this side. It's your item. Would you like to start?
Actually, I have no questions. I've been going over this for quite a while.
Any points you want to add?
We talk about medical professionals being available to basically oversee dispensing, and I think that's one thing that we have here in the park. We have quite a few residents that have the expertise to assist us, in an emergency like that. I know with developing a dispensing plan, we also have some good resources here in the park. We have one that works for City of Miami Fire Rescue who has developed some of these plans. So she's
very close to you.
Said she would volunteer her time to work with the village manager for whatever questions he has. So I can highly recommend her.
And she is?
That would be my wife.
Fair enough.
No, personally, I love the idea of having to stand in line for 20 minutes versus 4 hours.
Commissioner Johnson. No, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor.
I have several questions. I think it sounds like a really wonderful program. I'm curious about the 14 open point locations. Which is the closest one to us?
So unfortunately, we do not give that information out until the time of an emergency. If you think about shelters during a hurricane, we need time for our staff to get to those locations. We need time for the medication and for security to go ahead and secure those facilities. The way it would work is after the notification is made to all of our closed point of dispensing partners to let them know to get their plans going. We're also working with those open pods to get that stuff going, and then everything will go out through public messaging, TV, radio, internet, everything, to let people know where is the closest point of dispensing. Additionally to that, when you use the registration system, like I said, it's a dark site, but which will be active during an emergency. Once you put in your zip code, it'll tell you the closest open point of dispensing to your location. The way it would work for a closed point of dispensing is, and this is just an example, Village of Biscayne Park would be given a closed point of dispensing code, let's say number 1. So all of your residents, anybody who's counted in your plan, once they put in their zip code and everything like that, there's also a spot there that says closed point of dispensing, identification number. They would just put in 1. So that way you guys know that, you're expecting 3,000 or however many. If anybody tries to come to your door, that's the other thing, I'm sorry I didn't mention though, closed point of dispensing is not made available, it's not made notice to anybody. So only you and whoever you tell will know that you guys are a closed point of dispensing and have medication. So you guys control it completely. Nothing from our public messaging, from the state standpoint, will ever say that you guys are a closed point of dispensing. So you wouldn't have to worry about people coming to your door unless somebody else has mentioned it.
I'm sorry. Sorry. Sorry, Rosemary.
So it sounds like a really wonderful thing for us to have for our residents, and having it closer to home is the more effective way of getting it out to people in an emergency like that. But I have some concerns about our staffing and whether we can meet those responsibilities, whether we have enough people out there. We, number one, seem to have a problem with getting word out to our residents. We keep trying to work on it, but in fact, on Saturday, we're going to have a meeting to talk about what do we do with hurricanes and what's the expectation, so that we can at least tell people this is as far as we can go. And you need to take care of yourself from there on in. So I'm concerned about getting the word out to people. I'm also concerned about that commitment for a medical dispensing professional, because these are tend to be first responders or critical personnel that are, in the case of an emergency, they're called into their day jobs and they work Alpha Bravo shifts. So that those people may not be boots on the ground here in Biscayne Park because they're at Jackson Memorial or wherever those other sites are where they're called. I would like for us to have a conversation with people who might be able to serve in that capacity, and at least establish a relationship so that we can maybe get a commitment or know how many of the, we may have 40 doctors, nurses in the village, but how many of those could we really count on? I also would like for our village attorney to give us an opinion on the MOA before we enter into it. But if we can work all of those things out, then I think that it's a good thing.
No, definitely. And to speak to your point, one of the concerns with a lot of closed pod partners is that medical professional. One thing we do like to remind people is, they don't have to be somebody that is on a paid staff or anything like that, like on a payroll. It could be a retired individual, from your community. And as far as, that you have a few different things that we can help you work through, ways to identify people, so that you guys would feel confident. And like you said, sometimes, and we know this firsthand because we do work in a first responder role during emergencies, so your day job kind of takes precedence. But again, if you have retired individuals, and if you could, for you guys, for your population, since it's so small, really you would only be looking at maybe one medical professional that would be needed. And the reason I say that is because, again, all the triaging, all the questions that would be asked, they're all very simple questions that, are you allergic to doxycycline? Are you allergic to ciprofloxacin? These are very common antibiotics that most people take for something at some point in their life. But then also our triaging algorithm is the same thing that we'll be using at our open pods. And I can tell you for the health department, we don't have a lot of medical staff either. So we'll have about one either doctor, nurse practitioner, pharmacist at each one of our locations to answer those questions as well as somebody that can be called on, by phone. So as long as you guys can identify, one person, maybe two as a backup, or, hey, go 3 deep if possible, you guys would be in pretty good shape. And then as far as getting in, sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was going to say, as far as getting the word out, you guys have a different setting, but I know that some of our other closed pod partners, it's part of their yearly training that they do, or it's part of their, like annual updates, if they send out like newsletters and stuff like that. And that's where it gets really exciting with the trainings and putting together your actual dispensing team. My suggestion, and we had sort of spoke about this before, would be to actually use some of your residents and get them involved in that actual planning. So that way they can help spread the word as well and get as many people as possible into those trainings. And then it kind of becomes fun in a way to start setting up, okay, how can we do this? How can we do this effectively, efficiently? And some of the ideas that can come out of those planning will definitely probably maybe spark some interest throughout the community. So, but we're more than available to speak further as well.
I think that it could be very positive communication with our residents to pursue the plan, but I'd like to see those other things worked out.
Definitely. And to speak about the MOA, the CDC does have a technical legal team that is available to either speak over the phone conference call or to come in person to answer any kind of legal questions that may come up, and about the public health law and whatnot.
Thank you.
I probably am going to echo some of the things that Vice Mayor Ross said, but because I too would like the legal side of the MOA looked at, especially if we're going to have a medical professional volunteering as a resident. You just named a list of things that, let's say, a physician would be asking, are you allergic to this, allergic to that? Who comes up with that list? Is that the DOH that comes up with that list?
Yes.
So then my next question is always going to go to liability. If that list is not complete and the right, let's say, medicine interactions isn't mentioned, and we have an issue with a resident taking something, so I want to work out those things.
Definitely.
Also, as far as where the pod is, I don't know if any of these medications or want to call them antidotes or anything like that, like do they need to be refrigerated or kept at certain temperatures to know whether or not we can actually provide that type of facility?
Right, and to speak on that, most of your antibiotics do not need to be refrigerated or anything like that. We do require that you have a safe space or somebody to secure the area where the medications are, just for safety reasons. But if we are looking at vaccinations, then that is something, though, that the closed pods would not be able to do because of medical staffing. You would need more medical professionals to actually give those vaccinations. So really, when we're looking at closed points of dispensing, we're looking for pills. And pills, do not have that requirement.
Anything else? Just one follow-up?
Just one follow-up.
Just give me one. Is it, okay, go ahead. Vice Mayor.
So just one follow-up. Who decides, for example, we have very limited staff, and they would be integrally involved in whatever process we come up with. Does the benefit extend to them, even though they may not live within the municipal boundaries?
That's completely up to you. So that's the great thing about being a closed pod. You guys can decide who exactly is your population. So for instance, like we have universities, they cover all their students, they cover all their faculty, the staff, plus all the family members of those faculty and staff. So you guys can decide that. It's completely up to you. We don't have any requirements saying, oh, they have to have a zip code that's in Village of Biscayne Park. You guys list that. Again, that's for your knowledge only. Basically, what you would give us as part of that agreement are the numbers of medications or courses of medication. So you would say, we need 3,000 for residents, but then we also need an additional 2,000 for staff and family. And that's not a problem for us. Really, the idea is to get as many people covered by closed pods as possible, so that way we can make sure that the entire community or entire county is covered and gets medications as quickly as possible. So if you want to add in more, we're happy with that, as long as you guys can adequately dispense it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, just a few small questions. I think they've pretty much answered most of them, which are the legal questions, and I'll defer to the attorney on that in a moment. The medications that you're talking about, in addition to oral antibiotics, is there anything like patches or sublingual things or anything, or is it going to be?
So there may be some oral, amoxicillin sometimes comes in an oral suspension. Right. Usually it's used for children, though. So we do have a small
That was
amount of
my question. Okay,
Yes.
you're reading my mind. So
Yeah.
you said there'll be separate protocols for children as there are for adults,
Yes.
and what about the elderly as well?
Yes, ma'am. We have a ton of, our algorithm is pretty comprehensive, and that's something we can share with you guys. If you would like, I can send it to you. But we also have all the dosing instructions, how to crush pills for individuals who can't swallow pills, how you would crush it, how you would make it into an oral suspension. That's all fully covered. All of that comes from the CDC as well. We also have what's called an emergency youth authorization that comes from the FDA. So therefore, sometimes children, wouldn't be able to take doxycycline, let's just say. But for this situation, an emergency use authorization will come from the FDA saying that it is effective and safe for children to take it and give us the quantities and the dosing instructions to go along with that.
The only other question, well, I think the attorney and the liability issue, which I think they've covered pretty well here, is the concern. My only concern, or my question is, if we had police officers or first responders, are they part of that protocol, but no, correct?
And so if you guys have your own police department,
Correct, we have our own police department, so...
cover them. Cover them and their families. Again, it's whoever you want.
No, I'm not talking about the coverage, that's a given. I think that's a given. My issue is, they are technically not a nurse, a doctor, but if they are EMT trained or...
Right.
That's
yes,
what I'm
ma'am.
asking.
Sorry, I didn't understand your question the first
Could
time. I
they be
apologize.
part of that, because one of the issues was our staffing. That is always our greatest struggle here. We have a tiny little staff that does a tremendous job. But could there be some sort of training where that is then covered so that if the first responder that we thought could show up and had to go someplace else, we would have that backup plan
Yeah, so that will all...
or help out?
Yeah, that will all depend on the declaration that comes from the governor. Like I said, so during H1N1, I know it was years ago, but that was the last time we actually had to ever activate this. The governor went ahead and said EMTs, paramedics, nursing students, and gave a whole list of people who could go ahead and dispense. So yes, if you have somebody who has a medic license, even though they're serving in like a law enforcement capacity, and if that declaration comes that medics or EMTs can go ahead and dispense, then you can utilize them however you need.
Or ex-military personnel that had?
Ex-military,
Okay.
yes.
All right, thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Are there any other questions? Okay, are there any motions? Well, actually, first, Attorney Dunkel, could you comment on the MOA and liability issues?
I briefly reviewed it. As always, the village is covered by sovereign immunity, and especially in times when you have emergencies that require dispensing, liability. It's kind of a fluid concept and something like that. I think the best thing, if you want to bring it back next meeting so we have an opportunity to fully review it. I don't know if Mr. Hearn fully reviewed it. I obviously have just seen it today for the first time. But that would be my recommendation if you would like us to do a full analysis on the liability.
Okay. You brought it up, so both of you? I see both of you did, right? Okay.
I'd like it reviewed.
Okay, so do you want to go ahead and bring this back as a...
Yeah, I'll make a motion to bring this item back in the next commission meeting after the attorneys had a chance to review liability. And I'll get the contact number you said the CDC legal team.
Yeah, we can go ahead and get in contact with the technical
Yeah,
advising
good.
team.
That way we can make them available to
And actually, I'm not sure we need a motion for that. I think we need a motion to have the attorney review the MOA and look for liability.
I make a motion for the attorney to review the MOA and look for any liability.
Not even necessary.
I don't even...
Do we need a motion?
Right, no, in fact, I think that it would need to go back on the next agenda because there's a resolution attached to it, so it'd need to come back anyway.
Anyway, okay, so we'll
Right.
just bring it back.
Right.
All right,
So you're
perfect.
basically approving it to be reviewed at the next meeting.
So it comes back as a resolution.
Okay, all right, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming and presenting to us.
No, thank you for
And
having
you
us.
just need a motion for that as well.
Do we have a motion to go ahead and bring it back?
Yeah, right, to
Yeah, I made that motion.
set the resolution for the next meeting.
Send the resolution to the next meeting. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to move the resolution to the next meeting.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Vice Mayor, the next item is yours, Pelican Harbor sponsorship.
Okay. So we received sort of a solicitation from Pelican Harbor. We've done different work with them in the past, and they've done bird releases here. Many of our residents pick up birds that have been injured and deliver them to Pelican Harbor, where they get rehabilitated. Several of our residents also volunteer at the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station. My husband and I personally have supported them for many years, and the Village Commission has in the past also supported through a resolution, which I sort of copied from the last one that we did and attached to the agenda item, and also through participation in their annual event, their annual fundraiser event. I know there was a resident that was concerned with monetary support from the village for the Seabird Station, and she wrote to us about that. And she had some other issues about what their process is. We really are not in a position to tell them how they should run their organization. And as far as the annual event, these nonprofits have to work actively at fundraising throughout the year. They have this one event where they get a good chunk of financing, but raising money is a very public process, and it happens all the time for them. If they fall back on that, then they just don't get the money in. And part of partnering with cities and with municipalities is that it broadens their exposure and broadens the interest of people who hear of the wonderful things that they do. So I brought the resolution just as a statement in support, and I guess I'm looking to make two motions. One, to approve the resolution, and the other for the village to participate in the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station's annual event with a sponsorship of $1,000. Okay, I think I started on that side, so I'll go back over here. Mr. Johnson-Sedella?
I also got that same email from the concerned resident. I agree with Vice Mayor Ross that we can't tell them how to run their organization, but we can decide whether or not, for example, birds released, if it creates a danger. I'm an animal lover, and I want to know that if we're rehabilitating birds, that they're being released in a safe manner. As far as a sponsorship, I guess my next question would go to our manager, whether or not this appeared, whether we're budgeted for this, because I just have a concern about spending residents' tax dollars for something where I'd like to see the cost-benefit analysis to us rather than getting the word out about Pelican Harbor. I can say right now, sitting here, that I'm willing to donate my next commission check. I have no issue with that, writing a check right now for an amount of money. My checks are, what, 500 minus tax? I'll give that, rather than having resident tax dollars, especially if it's not been budgeted. Because our tax dollars of our residents should go to things that benefit our residents. So I guess I asked you a question, I didn't stop talking.
It hasn't been specifically budgeted. There are items in the budget where I'm sure we can find it if I'm directed to by the commission. And so...
If I could respond to the other question?
No, we're going to do once around, and then we'll
Okay.
come back.
I would go along with the resolution for them. However, I don't think I would sponsor their fundraising event. We could just make a donation. The thought that we're giving them money and then we get seats at a table, to me, just doesn't make any sense. The fundraising event is a dinner, is it not?
No, it's not a dinner.
There are two different events. There's the fundraiser, which we attended last year, and the taxpayers paid $500 for, just to be clear, and that's a dinner type event. It's a food event. But there's also other things you bid on. It's a fundraising event. This particular event is $1,000, and since this is Vice Mayor's, I'll let her talk about the $1,000. Please, Vice Mayor. The $1,000.
It's not a sit-down dinner event. They try to get the biggest bang for their buck, so it's like a cocktail hour with hors d'oeuvres at Miami Shores Country Club, and I'm sure that Miami Shores Country Club subsidizes the cost of it for them, so it really is many different partners and communities trying to build an event to raise money for the Seabird Station.
Again, as I say, I know the Miami Shores Country Club. because I go to Rotary there and other things. They don't do a lot of stuff for free. And if you buy a ticket, there's a certain number of seats, you have to guarantee. If we were just to make a donation to them directly, that I could understand. As far as going through the fundraising event, I would not be for that at all.
Okay. Commissioner Tudor.
Actually, I reached out to Mr. Boykin and actually had a conversation with him, asking him, residents don't mind, giving to charity, giving to an organization like this, but, a lot of people, the questions have come up about getting the best bang for the buck, and what would be, where would the most money go to for the care and rehabilitation of the birds? Would it be a donation straight to them, or, would he recommend, what about fundraiser? One of the questions I had for him was, for example, if we did, I think last year we did a $500 sponsorship. So, because I just asked him about that, I said, if we did a $500, how much of those dollars go to the care and rehabilitation of wildlife? He was very straightforward with me that part of the $500 will be to cover the cost of the event. He says it comes out to about $100 or $120 per head. So at $120, you're looking at, for 2 tickets, $240. So, you're looking at roughly like a 50-50 split. So, I understand the importance of assisting in the fundraising, but I'm more inclined to just make a straight donation to the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station.
I've rehabilitated wildlife since I was about 5 years old. I've spent a lot of time rehabbing all sorts of animals. So the support for Pelican Harbor is close to my heart. My concern is, as sitting up here as the mayor and not as a person who's done wildlife and rehab work, is that we continue, whether it was, $2,500 to the seniors, and then we don't really budget for it. I think we have to be very careful that we don't, every time somebody wants to come, that we do this in a process that's in a municipal process, which is one in which we budget for it, we plan on it. And also, we're not the only source of money to Pelican Harbor. I do realize that. We do have a lot of residents use them. I've used them for many years. I have no problem and have given money and will continue to do so. I don't have a problem giving money either. I have a problem giving taxpayers' dollars to this. And that's what I'm concerned. I think if we're going to do this, it should be around, we should have a set amount of money we set aside every year that we know we're going to give away to some worthy charity, and put that in our budget every year. And the other concern is with the hurricane here. We've spent quite a bit of money. We still don't know. We've had how many years of audits now that we still are trying to catch up on, and we don't really know what we have. And we've had such financial situations where we overspent on building $150,000. So I think we're at a point now where we have to really realistically look at what we can do and what we can't do. And since we don't even know right now, I know you'd find the money, and I know you'd work very hard to make sure it worked with anything that we give you. But I think at this point, I can't support this just because of that. And once again, I'm happy to give money towards anything that Pelican Harbor needs as well, but I don't think we should be doing so with taxpayers' dollars at this point. We did $500 last year for the fundraiser, and I would recommend that next time we do this, we give straight money as well, because the dinner, for me, is not of interest either. I'd rather see the money go straight to them. Vice Mayor.
Just to answer Commissioner Sardella's question about the cost benefit, in the backup, there's tally by Chris Boykin, the head of Pelican Harbor Seabird Station, and he talks about 43 native birds that came from Biscayne Park in the past 3 years were treated at the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station at a cost of $390 per patient, or $16,770 total over a period of 3 years. So it's a little over $5,000 a year that we could say that they've invested just straight cost out of their pocket. Will not set aside the benefit of having birds rehabilitated and released here in the village, and so many other externalities that come from that. So I'm making a motion to approve the resolution in support, which does not impact, it has no monetary impact, it just is a statement in support of the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station and its commitment to preservation of the environment and wildlife.
I'll second that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Then, taking heed of the comments of my colleagues here in the dais, I'd like to make a motion to donate $500 to the Seabird Station, no strings attached.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
No. I'll be making my separate donation, though.
I'm sorry, I thought I heard 3 ayes and 2 noes.
Motion carries, 3-2.
Okay. Thank you.
Request for placement of items on the next agenda. I believe we've already replaced the Commissioner Tudor's motion. We've already, Vice Mayor's already said she'll bring that motion back for the, we've already made that motion, so those are 2. Are there any other items? I may be bringing an item, but I'll wait on that. Village Attorney for the Attorney's report?
Yes, John wanted me to convey, as you know, an opportunity came up for the firm, which was accepted. And Mr. Hurd wanted to say that he is going to miss representing the Village of Biscayne Park and all the people which he came in contact with. As you know, he has been here for 20 years. And because of that, you know, he's grown a lot of relationships. And he does want me to express that he will miss everybody. But he appreciated the opportunity to know you all and to represent this commission.
Thank you. Village Manager's report?
Okay, just a few things that haven't been reported widely lately. The mayor and I met with Waste Pro last week. We discussed some service issues, the routes they take. What we're trying to do is alter their routes so that they'll make more left-hand turns in areas where they're starting to tear up swales and so forth. So we're working on that. Also the potential of changing the days of service to Monday and Thursday so that we only have trash or bulk and garbage pickup 2 days a week. It won't be the current 3 days a week that we have. Like currently we have bulk on Monday, garbage on Tuesday, and garbage and recycling on Friday. So we're trying to reduce that.
Could you just clarify so everybody, so that would be Monday, and Monday would be for both bulk and garbage, and then
Right.
Thursdays would be recycle and garbage again?
Garbage. So that instead of Friday, yes. And so these are things that we're working on with Waste Pro. We've clarified our expectations of what we would like their service to be, again, and we'll continue to follow up with that. And so the hurricane preparedness meeting is set for this Saturday, the 10th. I would actually ask the commission if we can postpone that to the 24th. There's some more information I'd like to include in that I've not been able to get yet. But that's up to you guys. If you will allow me to postpone that to the 24th, I would appreciate it.
I have no problem with that. We went this way, so I'll go this way. Commissioner Tudor, have a problem with that? First of all, everybody checks the calendar, see if everybody's available on the
That's what I was
24th?
just looking at. No, I have no problem with that. I mean, it's in order to gather more information for the meeting, that's probably would answer some questions we have or help us in making some determinations, so I have no problem to move that to the 24th.
24th would be fine.
It's fine for me.
Lisbon?
I'm available.
Okay, it's fine with me as well.
Okay. We worked on the project for the Department of Revenue. Thank you, Linda Dillon. And that's all been submitted, so we're now caught up on that. And the FRS audit, there is a amount due. I've asked GMS to put together to find out the exact amounts due as we go back over the years to calculate this.
Could you just clarify that for everybody who may be watching in a little bit more detail?
We were audited by the Florida Retirement System. The result of that was that we found that we had not paid into the FRS system for people who were out on sick leave, and there was a couple other areas, and that was some of the findings of that audit. So we need to go back and clear that up. GMS has offered to do that. That's outside of the scope of work we currently have with them, and so there would be an additional cost for that. I have not heard an exact amount on that, and I'll ask for that, but that will probably be coming back next commission to just get approval for that. And so, I'm sorry?
Question, or you want to just wait until you're done?
Please,
with
go
all
ahead.
your-
No, that's fine.
I had a question on Waste Pro, but we won't go back there right now.
Okay.
On the FRS, how far back is the look back? How far back are they looking for these?
I want to say, Paul, do you remember off the top of your head? 2011?
Yeah, it was 2011,
Yes, thank you.
So it's 2011 to
Current.
To current.
17?
So, yes.
Yeah, Christian, can I answer that real quick?
Please.
Please, yes.
Yeah, the payroll records, if available, would have to be audited back from 2011 for this error or miscalculation. I think it was an ambiguity back then, frankly, but it's owed. We could like to do it for a minimal amount of money. I'd like to get started on it, frankly, and we didn't have a chance to talk about it directly. I know it will not exceed, I can put a cap on it to not to exceed like $2,500. It could easily go past $5,000 worth of work, but I'll just put a hard cap on it for you so we can get moving on it.
Okay. With that in mind, with a hard cap of 2,500, Attorney, can we do a draft and adopt?
You can do a draft and adopt just to add to the scope of service this particular audit and the issues relating to it. I'll get the exact language from the village manager, but you would need to amend the agreement, yeah. And
Okay.
you could do by draft and adopt.
Could we do that this evening so they could get started on that, or no? Or do we not want to do that? What would you recommend?
I mean, I'll leave it up to the commission to decide if it's something that's going to start. I mean, you did set a special meeting next week as well.
Yes, we did. Could we bring that, normally special meetings have one topic. Could we bring the second topic together to do that?
I don't see an issue with that legally.
Okay. Is there objection to doing that? Vice Mayor?
You prefer that than to rushing into something without having all of the information.
That's fine.
So as long as we put it on the agenda and people advertise, it's advertised that way. But I do appreciate your stepping in. A question, though, are we going forward now, are we set up properly so
Yes,
that
everything
that issue
has
doesn't
been
arise?
correct, actually, for some time. It was a period from 2011 to 2014, it appeared, is where that was the error they found. Because remember, the FRS audit went back 5 years or something, 3 to 5 years, so it was before that period. So we have to go back because we think the records went to 2011.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so do we have consensus on the commission? Go ahead and bring that forth in the next meeting. Yes?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you, Paul. So we've been talking with FCB Merchant Services as well, and that's something that I will probably, if we're going to add to the next commission meeting, I'll probably bring that up there as well.
That would allow us to...
This would allow us to take credit cards, and so that way hopefully it will make it easier for people to pay code violations, permitting fees, all of that. We'd have to set probably a convenience fee of some sort to recap the 2.29% that would go to the bank. So we'd probably do it like a 3% to capture the admin costs and so forth for that.
I believe we would have to set that fee through a resolution. So we might want to just look at all of our fees if there are others that we want to update.
That's
I
the
know there's been
possibility.
talk of some others.
I was going to try and bring this back next week. I'm not sure I'd have time to look at all of our fees right in the next week. But I agree, our fees do need to be looked at.
And I know we're also talking about, if I'm not mistaken, with bonds and other, some of the other things we've talked about. So, we'll see if you can get it Yeah.
If I can pull that together in the next week, I will try, but...
If not, the following.
Yeah, I'd like to get the merchant services going as quickly as possible, just so that we can start to collect that, because I think that will actually help us as far as collection of costs. If people can go on our website and not have to come in and pay a code violation and just, punch it into the website, I think that might be productive for us. And so, the CAFR, GMS is working on that. 2016 books are ready. They've been delivered, I believe, to the auditor now, and he's working on it. He'll be reaching out to us with questions and keep going, but we are on track to get that done on time.
I just want to say thank you.
GMS and Sharon Rosina specifically has done a phenomenal job on pulling that together. It was a ton of work recreating, the whole year.
I just want to, once again, reiterate how grateful we are for how rapid and the professional nature in which you've done this and how quickly and thoroughly you've done it. Thank you.
Awesome. And I think that's really it. The rest is all pretty much the routine stuff that's in my weekly reports.
I did have one clarification for everybody in the Waste Pro meeting, since we were the ones there. I'd like just to make sure that they're aware of what you talked about. It was routes. It was leaving garbage cans, making sure they're off to the side, not in the middle of the driveways. They will be turned upside down so they don't fill with water, which is what they're going to be doing, which they have done anyway, but they're going to continue doing that. Trying to think what else. There was a couple of other items that had to do with the...
Service issues.
Yeah, and then there was a lot of issues, service issues, customer service issues, but one of the things with the routes I think we were talking about was not only the left turning, but also to make sure it was elongated. So instead of having routes where they're doing a lot of this, they were straight east and west and north and south routes. So there was discussion on that. Anything else I missed, Steve?
No, I think that was it. Commissioner or Vice Mayor Ross, I believe you have...
On the issue of Waste Pro, I appreciate your negotiating with them for better service. I think that's the manager's role to do. I do feel a little uncomfortable with the mayor being involved in negotiations, because that's not the role of the mayor. But I also want to remind you that if we're changing the days of service, I believe that those dates were set by an amendment to the Waste Pro contract. So we want to make sure, if we're going to change the days of service, that we change it in the same manner, at the same level, with a resolution and an amendment to the contract.
Okay, thank you.
Just for the record, since the mayor is a representative of the city, I'm not negotiating a contract. I'm relaying concerns that we have all done at the village, and to reiterate what all the community members and everybody on this commission has said were the issues. That's all.
But those discussions led now to an amendment to the Waste Pro contract
No.
for the days of service.
That discussion for the days of service was done by the manager. The areas that I brought up were the concerns to the residents regarding location of trash cans, turning radiuses, and damage to the roads, for clarification.
I must admit, I've also spoken to the people from Waste Pro when they've missed my deliveries about at least if their routes could give us somewhat specific times. So if somebody calls up and say, I live on 119th Street and nobody's been here and it's 2 o'clock, we won't say to them, oh, they're still picking up. We'll know, oh, wait a second, they go by your house at 12:15. So if they're not there by 2 o'clock, then there's a problem. At least we can...
And for the record, any commissioner can ask to meet with any vendor. There is nothing, and attorney, I'll have you also comment on this. Any commissioner can meet with any vendor and have a discussion regarding services. That's not negotiating a contract, just to be clear.
I'm unaware of anything that would prohibit a commissioner from discussing matters with a vendor.
Thank you very much. Okay, anything else from...
And I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. So long as they're not lobbying for additional thing, if it's just, I want to make that clear. So long as there's no lobbying or anything else involved, other than if it's just discussing issues with service, like especially with Waste Pro, which services everybody in the community. Just had to clarify.
Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and move on now to boards.
We have no reports at this time for the boards.
Okay. commissioner comments?
I've got a couple. Christian and I are meeting with somebody from the assistant director of Miami-Dade Public Works as far as what we can do as traffic calming, street signage, speed limits, and she's actually coming down here to drive around the village so she can see the way the village actually looks, the narrowness of the streets, roads, and then come up with some sort of an idea. So it's not a cookie cutter thing, because our village is much smaller, our roads are much smaller, our roads are too narrow. I reached out again to FDOT. They are still working on their report about 6th Avenue, about the possibility of doing maybe something for calming and something for a traffic light and some crosswalks, so residents can get from one side of the village to the other and hopefully don't get run over.
Okay. Any other commissioner comments?
Yes.
Vice Mayor?
I'd like to draw the commission's attention to the village charter and section 4.02 of the village charter, which is titled Prohibitions. And 4.02 sub B 1 says, "It is the express intent of this charter that individual commissioners may make recommendations for improvement in village operations to the manager only. Individual commissioners may discuss any matter of village business with the manager, but is strictly prohibited from directing or otherwise ordering the manager to take any particular action, except for purposes of inquiries and investigations made in good faith. The commission and its members shall deal with village officers and employees who are subordinated to the manager solely through the manager. Neither the commission nor its members shall give any
I don't think you need to read the
directly to any such officers or employees, either publicly or privately, and I do believe that that includes village vendors and contracts."
Is that your legal opinion?
It would only include it if it expressly states it.
Okay, just one person at a time. Let's just do this one person at a time. Commissioner Johnson Sardella, please.
If it's not expressly stated, then it doesn't, but I will defer to our sitting village attorney right now. It doesn't mention vendors at all here.
When
I
I,
think
yeah, and I asked John about it.
The attorney just gave us still stands. I don't think it's confounded or contradicted by the statements in the charter.
In reviewing that section, I stand by my original statement. I do not think that prohibits commissioners from speaking directly with vendors, especially something such as Waste Pro, as Commissioner Bilt said. He's had service issues. It does not, I do not believe the charter will require Commissioner Bilt to bring it to the manager to bring up a personal matter. As far as the mayor's in a meeting with the village manager, I further do not think that this section would prohibit the mayor from being in that meeting, especially since, for all intents and purposes, the mayor is the ceremonial figurehead of the village.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If we're going to continue on this, which I don't, actually, I'm going to defer this till later. I'll bring that back next meeting. Announcements?
Oh, I have a comment.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We had a resident step up earlier, and I think in the comments, of a comment, made a comment that, the commission hasn't really done a lot. I think the problem at times is that there's way too much infighting, way too much allegations, way too much. Bottom line is, it's getting us away from the job of what this commission should be doing. Somebody asked me if I was considering running for re-election in November, because they thought that if I was, I must be certifiably insane. But I told them, yeah, I'm going to run in November. The reason why is that I feel there's a lot more that we should be accomplishing, that there's a lot more that I want to do on this commission, that unfortunately we get bogged down in some of these asinine discussions. And I'm hoping that we can all put things aside and understand that we're all here for the betterment of this village and focus on that.
Thank you. With that, I don't think I can add anything to that. Announcements, please.
Okay, so now I've got to change this because Saturday we're not having the hurricane debriefing. So Monday, March 12th, we will be having the Biscayne Park Foundation meeting Monday, March 12th, we will also be having the Code Compliance Board meeting. Wednesday, March 14th, we will be having the Public Arts Advisory Board meeting. Thursday, March 15th, will be the Parks and Parkways Advisory Board meeting. Monday, March 19th, is Planning and Zoning. Saturday, March 31st, is the annual spring egg hunt. And Monday, April 2nd, will be the Planning and Zoning Board. So let me go back to, we're changing the debriefing now to
24th.
March 13th.
No, hurricane debriefing is March
Oh, sorry,
24th.
March 24th, and we're having a special meeting on the 13th?
Yes, to cover
Okay,
two
so
items.
Special meeting, March 13th, and the debriefing will now be on March 24th. And our next regular commission meeting is scheduled for April 3rd at 7 PM.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All's in favor, aye.
Aye.